Hello, I'm Andre J, and today I'd like to talk to you about. I think this is going to be a talk that is going to be a little bit about just the ongoing discussion of sort of like where I'm at with software development, hardware development, and the sort of like ethics, I guess, the philosophical sort of like justifications as to like what I'm doing with this Patreon thing, what I'm doing with in terms of like what kind of compromises am I willing to make in order to like exist as a financially solvent entity in the United States of America in 2022. And also this new sort of, so I've sort of been teasing, folks have been hearing about this sort of gravity waves thing I've been working on, the video mixer, the hardware video mixer thing. So a bit more talk about what that is probably going to look like. And yes, the answer is there is going to be something for sale this year. For people who don't want to wait too long for the hot news or whatever. Yeah, my current plan right now is on like a sort of month by month basis. I'm going to be alternating months of focusing really heavily on teaching things, both IRL at the classes here at Phase Space, a couple of the sort of like intro to signals classes and stuff like that, and also the online classes via the video synthesis ecosphere. I'm trying to adapt as many of my classes, my online courses, to being non-coding based ones, because I feel like I've done some pretty good stuff with the coding ones, and I have some fun stuff that I can share with folks whenever we get the Patreon up to 500 US dollars a month. Got a lot of fun coding based stuff we can share there. I'm working on different ways to expand the various classes and stuff I can teach to people who don't have the prerequisites coding knowledge, and maybe are just not interested in coding at all. So I think the interesting thing there will be working on the chaos theory and generative art classes, how we can teach chaos theory and generative art techniques without going into the coding. And I think there's a lot of amazing resources out there at the moment for exploring complex systems and chaos theory, in terms of like what like open source software projects you can work on. I'll probably also sort of design and adapt a couple of things I've created already, so people can sort of interact and learn with these things without having to like do the coding themselves. So I'm going to be alternating sort of the focusing on, making a bunch of money by that way. I have been leaving the stores open since the last sort of like sales, because I realized if I just don't advertise things, and with prices the way they are right now, people just won't buy very much, and that's like, and I'm able to just sort of like go in and raise the prices as the prices of components go up. So yeah, keeping it on the down low a little bit, but I haven't completely stopped selling things. I'm just not going to advertise them. I'm not making that a focus of my life, and they are subject to, all of the sales are subject to just being stopped at any point. So just as a heads up for that, sales will be discontinued 1 year, probably slightly less than 1 year from now. All the vSerpy stuff, the hardware stuff, will be stopping doing that for indefinitely. So that's sort of like the big heads up there. The other big heads up is that I'll be doing some sort of like a limited Kickstarter kind of sales thing for this Gravity Waves project, and that will be hopefully getting that started October, November or so. The goal right now is this will be a mainly this will focus mainly on digital video input and output. So there will be some limited support for analog input. It will be digital output. This will be HD digital output. So just a heads up on that. Analog video is great. I think it's amazing, but it's all sort of highly contingent on like all of this gear that just really isn't being manufactured or supported anymore. And I think there's a lot of great projects out there that are based mainly around analog video, but realistically speaking, for digital video, for looking forward to the future, we're not talking about analog video anymore. Like there will always be a small devoted cadre of like folks working with analog video signals, and I'm definitely open to the idea of working in these hybrid hybrid analog digital worlds for development. But realistically speaking, if I want to make stuff that people can afford and that people can like do DIY in like a reasonable way, we're talking about digital video. And I feel like just sort of like making digital video I/O as sort of like the default thing, and analog is sort of like you can always convert the digital video to analog if you really need to, or you can just do your analog stuff, bring it in to the digital worlds, and then have that be your end of chain, because practically speaking, a lot of end of chain like workflows, if you're working in a live video, it's going to be digital anyway. So you're going to want to convert stuff to digital at some point. But yeah. And then the Gravity Waves project is going to be multiple input video mixer plus working with video feedback. And I had this Gravity Waves project. I had revision 1, which I'm going to be including in the next Video Waves update when that comes out. Hoping for that to drop in August. That's my goal. So the Rev 1 of Gravity Waves will show up in there. I'll probably call it something slightly different. And then this is sort of like a sideways project I'm working on here. This is a dual delay line version of the video mixer project. So what I mean by dual delay line is that we have basically multiple, so we have room for 2 video inputs to go in. I'm only doing 1 at the moment, and it's just 1 video input being split into 2 separate delay lines. But these are, so unlike the regular video waves which exists out there, that's a multi-tap on 1 delay line. And if you think about how multi-tap delay works, the original multi-tap delays were like, you have the, what do you call it? You have like a tape machine. You have 1 tape machine, and you're able to, and you've multiple like ways to read off of it. So when you are doing feedback on it, it's all feeding back onto 1 single like tape line. So even though you can take multiple taps off of that delay line, everything's going to be feeding back onto 1 thing. And this is pretty awesome for some purposes, but I noticed, so I was doing a lot of work with the wave pools, plugging wave pools into wave pools, doing a lot of fun stuff with that in the last year or so, and I just realized there's like, the kind of things you can do with independent delay lines are just sort of like so much crazier than what you can do with like the locked delay lines. So I wanted to sort of focus a bit of energy and time on working with stuff that allows you to kind of like have your delay lines be independent. So you can see what's going on here is we've got this mixer. We've got like a little janky little signal path control here where we can say if something's going to be like parallel or serial. And what I mean by parallel or serial is that we can set things up so we're running we're either like doing independent feedback lines, and then we're able to like combine them at the end of the chain. Whoop. Yeah, there's one way to visualize. So we have this other mixer right over here, which is based on combining the 2 things, or we could have them be parallel. And when you have the parallel thing, you can see that what we're doing here, we'll probably need to mess around a bit more with the color. I just have this default to difference mixing for the way to mix the 2 parallel video processors things. So you can see that whatever's different between these 2 is going to be mixed. So I'll probably have to like add a little bit more GUI, and this hardware, the final hardware that has an output that I'll be doing a limited sales on, will have like a GUI thing involved with it too. So there'll be a little LCD screen that you need to use in order to like work with to optimally work with the controls of this, because it's just going to be way more controls. If you want to have a multi-channel mixer thing and have it be compact and not have like a giant fucking console like the spaceship console things, then we're going to have to do GUI for that. There's just not really any way around that. But yeah, hopefully the GUI, I hope that the GUI will be as minimal as possible. But we can see that by doing the parallel lines, we're able to sort of like do two independent little feedback things, and it could be off the same input or off of different inputs, and then we can mix them together independently, which just from my experiences was like, it was essentially like going from like the standard sort of like mixer style trails and like whatnot to going to like very very highly like complex psychedelic patterns, and having them each be kind of independent delay lines too means you can have one be a really long delay and another one be pretty short. Something else we can do with that is if you have them serial, that means whatever happens here is then going to be echoed into here independently, and then we're going to do feedback off of that. So that allows for a lot of pretty crazy stuff too, and everyone should look forward to seeing a lot more complex videos of the kind of crazy shit you're going to see off of here. But yeah, so I guess some other stuff I wanted to talk about too, not just going into like what sort of things I'm interested in selling and stuff, is just like I want to talk a little bit more about these ideas of like why would anybody want to support a Patreon for me? Why does anybody support Patreons in general? What is the sort of like difference between like having someone be able to sort of like make a choice about what you're doing with like financial support, and as opposed to sort of the idea of like where you just make things and you sell them, where it's sort of like you're kind of like holding your what you perceive as your intellectual property to be sort of like hostage. So it's kind of interesting. I've seen a lot of people like helping me get the word out and stuff. And there's this thing where some people say is like, you should definitely support this person because they just deserve it. They deserve to have money for all of their hard work. And I think that's a pretty interesting thing to think about for a second, because who deserves money? How do we think about work, and how do we think about like what are people owed and what do people deserve? I thought this was like an interesting thing to start to think about, like back in the '90s when like Napster and shit first started coming out. You had this idea where like it's not fair to download music for free because musicians deserve to get paid for things. This is just sort of like you take it for granted. We're all Americans here. Like everyone is working and they deserve to get paid for their money. And I was always just kind of like, I'm not super sure that that's like that actually like holds up as like an ethos. And it's not that I don't think that like making music is hard work. Like I've worked as a semi-professional musician for a long time in my life, and I'm fully aware of like all of the work that goes into, even if you're just doing like studio work, or you're just doing like filling in for like live shows, filling in for studio stuff. Like making music is very hard work. But I guess the interesting thing to think about when you sort of like untangle the logic of like who deserves to get paid for something is just how do we think about like work in modern United States of America? And I think it's kind of fucked up in a lot of ways, to be honest. Like we think like at a base level of a lot of our assumptions is that like if you work hard, you deserve to get paid well. And we sort of like assume that's like the basis of like how people get paid, how people have like money and influence and privilege. Of course, this doesn't actually like reflect how things actually work. You can be a janitor, you can work really fucking hard to make things clean, and you're never going to get paid very much. Like the best paid janitor is still going to get paid much less than the janitor of the bank is going to be paid like exponentially less than the CEO of that bank or whatever. I don't know if banks have CEOs or anything. I'm probably betraying a severe lack of business knowledge and acumen here. But yeah, the person in charge of making like deciding like who gets real estate loans is going to get paid significantly more than anybody who has to clean up after everything. So it's pretty independent of like how much work you're actually doing, and it's mostly at that stage you're thinking mostly of just like one who is doing the gross work and who is doing the cool work kind of thing. So there's a lot of like these ideas of like social prestige and like are you like contaminated by the kind of work you do? Are you? Because I was a janitor for a while. I thought it was a great job. The reason I thought it was a great job is because I was unsupervised most of the time. I could listen to music on headphones most of the time. And nobody really expected me to like go through all that standard like social bullshit that comes with a lot of jobs. Those were things I valued a lot when I was a lot younger. It was just like, if I'm gonna have to like compromise enough to like get to pretend to like work for someone else, like to be in someone else's power, like it better be something where like I the amount of effort I have to go into pretending to give a shit about it is like basically nothing. It's like that kind of a thing where like you apply for a job at like Walmart or Starbucks or something, and then there's this whole thing on there where you're like you are applying and you have to like basically like you are forced to put so much energy into pretending that like I want a career with this place. Like they're like, why do you want a career with Walmart? Why do you want a career with Starbucks? It's like, motherfucker, I do not want a career with you or anything. I want to be able to pay rent and eat food. That's what I want to do. You want someone who is basically like desperate enough to sell their time in order to like compromise themselves to work for your bullshit company. And it's just kind of like it's psychologically awful to like be like putting people in the position where they have to be like, no, 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 I love Walmart. I stand up for the values that Walmart is all about, and let me just get on my hands and knees and like kiss your boots in order to say like in order to thank you for like allowing me the privilege of even applying to this job. I never got hired at either of those places because those are places where they have like those like huge tests where you have to like do like the multiple choice things about like whether you would like how you feel about if Tracy stole staples or something, or if Leonard was like Leonard said it was okay to like drink coffee on shift or something. Never was able to pass those like weird multiphasic personality tests. They could always tell that I didn't give a shit about them, I guess. Um, but yeah, so kind of tangly, kind of weird how we think about like you deserve money, but you need to like show that you've sort of like worked hard. Um, yeah, and I think honestly, if you like try to like work it out like logically or philosophically, like either nobody deserves anything or everybody deserves to have like some basic like human comfort and decency in their life. I tend to lean towards the one where I think basically like universal basic income is the only thing that like actually makes sense as a way to like sort of segue out of the capitalist mess that we're in right now. And I feel like with the sort of with the global de-dollarization movement that's happening, where a lot of countries are actively moving to like untether their economies from like the U.S. economy. I think we're going to be seeing some severe inflation in the United States. We're going to see a lot of prices of like foodstuffs, wheat, potatoes, corn, and petroleum and all petroleum related products are probably going to be like highly unstable. Stuff like real estate, like where you live, rent, and all that stuff, that's going to be like exceptionally volatile for a while because most of those prices are completely imaginary and fixed more by like the banks that profit off of real estate than like any sort of like actual reflected value of like what does like land or architecture or construction actually cost to build or to maintain. Um, so I feel like we're probably going to see like a lot more of like this combination. The United States always does this kind of like weird thing. Like we've only had in the Great Depression there was basically like functioning social welfare systems where you could actually just be like, hey, I'm totally fucked here, but can the government here just help me so that like I am not going to become homeless and starve to death. And they just be like, okay, basically, yes, here's some money, and we have a lot of make work programs where you can help us build dams, build hydroelectric power stations, put up power lines, or, just do like, write songs or make poetry or do this sort of like promotional, like propaganda work for the various sort of make work programs that that Roosevelt's government came up with to try to like help keep the Great Depression from from making everybody homeless. And then during the coronavirus thing, we had the PUA. There was the assisted, the unemployment assistance, where you didn't have to prove anything. You just say, hey, I need money. Please give me money, and the government just gave everyone money. So this was the first sort of like move backwards into like universal basic income that the U.S. has done in a long time. Of course, the main reason they did that is partially because giving handouts to corporations blatantly giving giant handouts to corporations has become like very sort of like it's hard to justify, so you can't really do that so much publicly anymore. It happens, of course, like constantly, but like giant bailouts, like the one that happened in 2008, Obama's bailout of banks and insurance companies and automotive companies, like it seems like a very hard one to pull off anymore. But if you also just give everybody money, if you give like all of the poorest people in the United States like $1,200 a month, the fact is that like everyone has to spend like at least half of that giving it back to the banks anyway. You're paying rent, and the person you're paying rent to doesn't actually own the building, and they're paying that in mortgage and interest back to the bank. You have to pay off your credit card bills. You're paying off medical debt. Like one way or another, like the redistribution of like cash that the PUA did, a lot of that was just going directly back to like the getting siphoned off to the large parasitic corporations who basically exist to steal everyone's like money as much as possible. But yeah, I think we're probably moving back into that at some point. Like there's this sort of mythical idea that we need to keep like capitalism moving. You need to keep people buying things. So I don't know. We'll find out in the next couple of years as to whether or not like we'll keep the government will keep doing this sort of like pretense to like capitalism, where you're just like, okay, well let's just give everybody like a couple $1,000s every month so that they can keep making their credit card payments and keep making their mortgage payments, their rent payments, and everything. So we can just like, like all of these sort of like stopgap measures to like fix the failing capitalist system that we're in right now. But then there's also this weird fucking morality thing that comes together with work where you're like, if we're giving someone a handout, it's like the way that welfare started working and unemployment started working in the 70s and 80s, where you have to like, the people in charge of giving out the welfare are all about sort of like, how do we make you feel like shit for doing this? We have to make sure that like if we're going to give people money, we want to make them feel as bad about themselves as possible and make them basically blame the victims as much as possible and make them blame themselves and like hate themselves for being a complete failure to like provide for your family or whatever. Um, yeah, so we're probably going to see some combination of the PUA kind of things combined with like some programs that are like designed to basically sort of like make you have to like justify like why you're such a worthless person that you like can't hack it in the real world. Call it the real world, like be realistic. You have to like sacrifice your values and times in order to like get by in like the capitalist society. Wow, what a vague ramble. But yeah, back to the question of like selling things, like who deserves money. It's like honestly, it's kind of hard for me to like sometimes go on with the whole like support my Patreon because I feel like we should be supporting everyone. We should be supporting everyone. Should be supporting one another. Like there's no reason like it's hard for me to say honestly like is there a better reason to just give me money as opposed to like helping out, I don't know, helping out your cousin with the broken car or something, or someone else in your life who you actually like know and interact with who like actually needs it? Because like everybody needs help at some point, and we should honestly be thinking about ways that we can like recreate our social networks and social support systems for one another instead of just like the whole Patreon thing is just like, well, I'm really great. I'm really special. Look at me. I deserve your money more than anyone else. And that's a little tricky because it's like, honestly, like I definitely try as hard as I can with the limited means that I have to like use my privileges and my skill sets to like try to make other people's lives better, try to help them. It's kind of like silly in one way to be like, oh, I'm creating software and artwork. Like on one scale of things, you're like, okay, well that's, people really don't need that sort of shit. On the other hand, like our art and like entertainment and creative tools are sort of like honestly are fundamentally like really really helpful to people. Like I do stand by the fact that like just if you create some sort of like art that changes someone's life for the better, like you have done something pretty great. And it's not like, oh, this is like more important than like feeding someone or something, because obviously it's not. But like providing entertainment and providing like creative resources and like helping educate people is definitely like a good thing and something I'd prefer to be spending my life on than like going around like convincing people to buy shit all the time. Um, but yeah, I think we're about done with this little update here. Hopefully, within like 2 3 weeks, I should have a way juicier thing to share, and I'll be probably looking for some folks to help beta test where I'm at with both the video waves updates and all the other sorts of new stuff. So please stay tuned for that. People in the Discord, people who pay attention to scanlines.xyz, and people on the Patreon will definitely get like some notifications about that stuff sooner than later. Um, but yeah, there's something I also just like to think about, and just in terms of like how I can encourage folks to like work on this sort of stuff and think about it in different ways is, or just encourage folks to like think about different ways to like of how they want to interact with capitalism in general. So there's this funny thing if you listen to or read a lot of like Noam Chomsky talks or interviews or AMAs or something. There's this interesting fact they bring up a lot. Especially if they're like talking to college students or something, and they usually say something along the lines of, okay, so everybody I'm talking to right now, they're talking to someone who's just graduating college or something or is about to graduate college. You're like, your main goal in life is to get a job and to work for someone else. And if you look at the history of human societies and how humans like human philosophies and like how like this isn't just like Western Europe. This is like all humans all time, everywhere. If you look at the vast majority of like what human societies value, it's far more common than not that people actually would think of the idea of selling your time to someone else, to work for someone else for the rest of your life, to think of that as being like one of the most horrifying things you could possibly do. In most societies and most times, the idea of selling your time to someone else is essentially considered selling yourself into slavery. And for most societies and most times, the only people who you could get, who you could hire on an hourly basis or like on a time-based basis to work for you, these people were slaves. This was the working for a wage for someone else was something that only a slave would do. You would have to have been someone who was captured in war in order to be someone who was in such horrible shape to be like, okay, well, I basically do not exist as like a real human anymore in the society, so yes, I will sell my time to you. They basically point this out and say, what do you think about that? Is do you think that this is like that we've like modern Americans have sort of like figured out like a better way to do things, that we're just like so advanced now that like we figured out the best way to do things is to like organize a system where you have to constantly sell your time to others in order to like make sure you have health care for your children, in order to make sure you have like food to eat and are able to like pay for like housing, like all these like basic fundamental things that like in most societies at most times these would be highly subsidized, if not just outright like free services, because it's like healthcare, being able to eat and having somewhere outside of the somewhere inside to sleep are just like, it's kind of hard to argue with those as being like pretty fundamental to being like being an alive human. That like these are things that like everyone deserves. But yeah, it's a really interesting point. Like, why do we think that that selling our time to someone else is okay? Do you really think that it's like the best idea in your life to go out and work for someone else? Do you really think it's the best idea in your life to like try to like even if you don't want to work for someone else and you want to start your own business, you're still locking yourself into this whole system where you are encouraging the whole mindset of like, my money, my time can be bought with your money. And that's pretty fucked up. I think there's some pretty severe logical and moral issues with the whole idea of saying my time can be bought with your money. And I think maybe there needs to be like some probably pretty striking changes in the way that we view money and we view communities and we view social interactions, in terms for like there to be some sort of like substantial change in the United States and Western Europe at the moment. But I think we're seeing a lot of impetus for these changes to occur very quickly, and they're escalating. So yeah. That's sort of the end of like the social theory section of this talk. um, but yeah, I guess stay tuned for more updates. Stay tuned for more updates on software and hardware. Stay tuned for more updates as I continue to develop my and expound upon my fringe social theories of like alternate economic strategies. Yeah. And as always, go check out the Patreon. Help me out there. Check out other people's Patreons too. Help out other people as well. It'd be pretty interesting to set up some like rings, some Patreon rings, where it's just a bunch of people basically like spreading Patreons, like explicitly just setting up rings where they are supporting each other in like circles. So yeah, maybe that's something to work on, is like setting up some sort of like a more like collective communist based sort of like Patreon thing where people are able to sort of like give back to one another in a circular fashion. It'd probably be the best if we could remove Patreon itself from that thing. So, Patreon is just another rent seeker like everyone else. Uh, but yeah, so I hope you learned some stuff today, and let me know what you think of this nonsense in the comments. And I guess, as always, have fun. See you next time.